Good afternoon. This is Gavin James, typically with the Reasons I Believe broadcast. Today we're having a very special broadcast. We have a very special guest in the studio. Go ahead and introduce yourself, and we'll get on with that.
Hi, my name's Dr. April Julier. I'm an assistant professor here at the University of Rio Grande, and I'm also the advisor of the LGBTA, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, and ally group here on campus.
All right. Of course, I'm in charge of the broadcast, the Reasons I Believe broadcast. We are broadcasting every Wednesday at 2:30 here from the studio here on campus. Trying to institute a philosophy type Bible study discussion type group called LIGHT, Living in God's Holy Truth. So you've probably seen flyers, you see LIGHT, you see LGBTA. We're coming together today. We're going to discuss some things. We have your introduction, and like I said, I'm broadcasting every week, so April, if you don't mind, I want to
Sure.
highlight you and highlight a lot of the things that I want you to bring to what we're talking about today.
Absolutely.
And just start off defining what is LGBTA, what does it
Absolutely.
stand for, and just get the basic understanding of what we're talking about.
Well, the LGBTA, each letter, it's an acronym. Each letter stands for a different identity in some sense. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and ally. Allies are the easiest, and they're the most allies. Allies are straight supporters or LGBT supporters of another identity. For instance, a bisexual person can be an ally to the trans community and to the gay and lesbian community because they don't identify as gay or trans. I tend to see this in a couple of different ways: monosexual versus pan or bisexual. Monosexuality encompasses heterosexuality, lesbianism, and homosexuality, gay, male-gay relationships. Women can be gay too, so often those terms are just used interchangeably. And then there's bi or pansexual, where somebody can have attraction to more than one more than one sex. Bisexual often is two sexual attractions, and pansexual is more than two. And often people at that point ask, well, what is more than two? We only have male and female, and that's where we get into trans. Often trans is represented TRANS with an asterisk, and the asterisk shows that there's many different ways of being trans. You can be transsexual, which means that you want to undergo gender reassignment surgery, sexual reassignment surgery, and move from being somebody who was born a man into being bodied as a woman. Or you can be transgender, somebody who embodies a different gender than the one they were assigned at birth, a different sex than the one they were assigned at birth, or somebody who enables or embodies a third space gender that is both kind of male and female. And a lot of times people will use genderless pronouns if you identify as trans, ZIR, HIR, things like that, to indicate the gender, the pronouns that indicate normally male and female will indicate an absence of gender in that respect. So that's kind of a little bit on LGBT. And here at Rio, our primary mission is to provide an opportunity and a space for safe fellowship for students who are LGBT identified and our allies, and organize events that increase awareness on campus. For instance, Ally Week we're having next week to encourage people to become allies and things like that. So.
Yeah, I didn't realize there was something coming up that soon. Are there any other events this semester, maybe even in the spring?
In the spring, we're definitely going to be doing our Pride Week again. We did that in the first time last year, and that had some pretty good results. I believe that this conversation is kind of coming out of the Pride Week discussion. And also, we're doing an Ally Week push. We're going to be having a movie night on Thursday, and you can find out any of our details on brio.edu/LGBTA.
Yeah. The Pride Week, mainly just the panel discussions that were going on last semester, I really was kind of astounded by everything that was being said, everything that was being set forth by the group, and I just think it's interesting for a lot of people to think what we're going to sit down and talk about today, how much of things we can agree on, because what's going to unite us is, I think it's what we need to emphasize right now than our differences, and there's a lot of things that I feel need to be addressed. But before we get into that, not just the future, not just the past, I want a little bit of history about how the group came to be in Rio, and I want to focus on, was there a lot of opposition? Because I've noticed I set up these flyers, we're going to be having this discussion, we're going to talk out these issues, and I've seen some flyers taken down. And I'm hoping it's for informational purposes, but I'm also seeing possibly the kind of negativity that you might be facing trying to get this group together. And I want you to talk about that a little bit, if there is anything you can address with that.
The group is new as of last year. We were a temporary organization without official status the year before. The founder of the group is Gina Pines, who's a humanities professor here at Rio, and I came on as a co-faculty advisor. And when Ms. Pines had to step down, I came in as the full advisor. I don't believe that we've had a lot of opposition to the group, at least not that has been brought to us.
To your attention?
Sometimes when we are visible on campus, as with activities fairs, sometimes we get some snide remarks, but that is an opportunity for conversation, and we take it as such. I think when I talked to some of my students about the event that's going on right now, they were surprised that we were getting together, and surprised that that the way I put it is, you'd be surprised how much common ground the two groups share. And I think that that was shocking to a lot of people. A lot of people think that the LGBTA and LIGHT would be diametrically opposed for some reason, and that doesn't make a lot of sense, because at the end of the day, it's all I think about love. So if people oppose the group, and I'm sure they exist because people oppose everything and everybody exists, that hasn't been brought to our attention as much.
Okay, well...
And we've had a lot of support from students, faculty, and administration here. So, and that's something that's been very comforting. We weren't sure when we went through organizational status through the process if we would be met with resistance. And Dean of Students, Dr. Danley, the president, they're all been very supportive of the organization being on campus. So I think as long as we continue to have administrative and faculty support, students will see what the organization offers and see that we're not a threat in any way, because it's just a group of people hanging out. Right.
One thing that I find is commendable is the panel discussions, the things that were going on. I think a lot of people could take your cause and they could go in a certain direction with it. They could say, well, let's just get rid of religion or something like that. And I think it was commendable, but why is this kind of dialogue important to you? Why is it important to us to have this basic understanding, this basic, being able to meet and talk like this, have an open and honest and sincere discussion? Why is that such an important thing for you, I think?
I think there's a couple of reasons, but they could probably fall under the umbrella of acceptance, right? A lot of people talk about tolerance, and that's great and everything, but I don't want to be tolerated. And I don't want students who are LGBT identified to just be tolerated. I want them to be accepted, embraced, understood, and not just like, okay, that exists, like the same way I tolerate the fact that I have to do the dishes. Do you know what I mean? I want a greater sense of acceptance, and I feel that the root of a lot of violence in general, but if we're specific to the LGBT community, comes from a place of not understanding, not accepting. And my personal stake is that I know that there are a lot of people who struggle with faith when they come out, when they realize that they're gay, when they decide to come out as gay, and it's a painful struggle for a lot of individuals. And I think that that's unfortunate. I don't think it needs to be a painful struggle. I think that while I don't identify as Christian, I believe that the message of Jesus Christ was one of love and one of acceptance, and one of accepting people as a ministry of inclusion, not a ministry of divisiveness, to breaking people apart. And so I think that there's a lot of connection between the idea of God as love, and I think that people need to understand that. With a lot of self-hate going on and a lot of other things being preached, I just think that death can happen when we don't accept that LGBT identities are real and are valid and are made in God's image in some sense. I've had friends and people that I've known been violently assaulted, and their lives have been changed as a result of hate. Now, I don't think that hate comes from religion, because on my understanding, religion has nothing to do with hate. So I don't know how that all connects, and I think if we just lay the cards out on the table, we'll be able to understand the common positions that we have, and understand that there isn't and shouldn't be a disagreement between living in God's holy truth and living as LGBT. Okay,
I can appreciate that. I had an opportunity to preach a couple Sundays ago, and part of the New Testament does talk a little bit about showing partiality. And the example is, do you treat someone differently because they dress differently? Do you treat someone differently because, this kind of thing? And I think that's the bottom fundamental principle I want to emphasize is, do you treat people differently because you disagree with them? Do you treat people differently because, they identify in a certain way? And that's up for a lot of other discussions, a lot of other issues. But I really try to challenge people, is it, are these people welcome in your congregations? Are they welcome to come and sit down and talk to you and discuss religion, discuss philosophy, discuss morality, and being open and honest about it? And I came across a quote that was just going through my newsfeed on Facebook, of course, and I think this kind of sets a tone for listening to people. And I think sometimes people get off on this, well, you need to hear this, you need to hear what I think, you need to hear my way. But Robert Frost said, "You're educated when you have the ability to listen to almost anything without losing your temper or your self-confidence." And I think along the line we've just lost the idea of sitting down and listening to people, trying to understand. And even if you don't agree at the end of the day, at least you can show respect for that individual, and you can try to understand a little bit more and educate yourself. And that's understanding the difference between what's the difference between being bisexual and what's the difference between being gay and lesbian. What's all this mean for me? What's this mean for how I deal with people? And I think that's the main bottom line that I want to strive for.
Yeah, I know I need to work on listening without losing my temper, and that's been part of my struggle. I used to call it tempering my feminist fury, but this idea of what's the point of a conversation? Do you know,
Mm-hmm.
is it to find some common ground, or is it to talk the loudest and pretend that you've won? Do you know? And I
Right.
think that just screaming, there's a line from this Pearl Jam song called Indifference, and it's, I could scream my lungs out, but, how much difference would it make? It's, no matter how angry you are and how much you're screaming and how loud you get, is that really going to affect any change in the situation? Is that really going to make people more accepting, make people understand? It's not going to lead to education, so I'm with you.
And don't get me wrong, I think there's things we should be angry about. You're telling me about an event that happened the other day, but put that into perspective, put that into context. It's not that we're not to be angry, we need to control ourselves and be angry and sin not is what, Scripture actually
Understand
says.
what we're directing our anger at. The event that you're speaking of in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is where I'm from, a few days ago there were two men walking down the street, and somebody screamed a bad word at them. Somebody screamed a derogatory term for gay men that begins with an F. I'm sure you guys can all figure it out. And the guy was like, "Yeah, we are." And at that point, three guys ran towards them, knocked the guy who had said something back down, and he has a bruise of a boot print on his face. And at that point, after he got kicked in the face, his partner jumped on top of him, and they began to kick him in the head. So they were both treated. They didn't have severe injuries, but that's just one situation in a town that's a little bit bigger than where we are now, but a town that's also pretty gay-friendly, where these issues still happen. And I think one story that always kind of impacts people, makes an impact, is a friend of mine, Kat, used to work as a marine biologist, and she was a student marine biologist going on to her master's degree, and she worked with dolphins. And dolphins are really sensitive animals. They know what you look like, they know what you sound like, they get used to a person. And she was walking down the street with a couple of women, and somebody drove past and screamed, I have to say it, somebody drove past and screamed "Dykes," and then they kept walking, and then the guy came back again, and instead of screaming this time, he threw a bottle out the window, and it hit her face and shattered on her face. And she's had a number of reconstructive surgeries, but as a result of the injury that she had to discontinue her study because it was too hurtful for the dolphins to see her in that state. They would become emotional, apparently, and so they couldn't. She couldn't continue to work with the dolphin. She couldn't continue to do what she loved, and that's because of one instance of hate. And
sorry, that individual, that wasn't the one that was holding hands with the other girl. That was your if I understand the story correctly. Mm-hmm. She was just one of your...
She was a friend. Now, she was gay, do you know what
Okay.
I mean? And she was walking with a couple of other women, and it was after a pride celebration. But,
Okay.
you know, I don't think... I've seen people say, you know, oh, it's so gay, and just throwing those words around and things like that.
I hate that as much as you do.
And I think...
Honestly do.
I think we need to be conscious of the language that we use and how that language creates a reality. If you start saying something bad is gay, then in the minds of people, people think that it's bad to be gay. And I think that affects LGBT people more than the non-LGBT community, because you don't even know that that's happening. There could be somebody who's LGBT identified, and you say something bad is gay, and then all of a sudden in their head, they feel self-conscious. They feel a little bit of self-hate. They start to wonder if they're bad for being who they are. My friend Brian used to tell me when he was 4, he realized that he was gay, and he used to pray to Jesus every night to make him straight. He has a condo with his partner in Jersey City now.
I've got a couple of ways I could go with that. Let's start with the idea. You said 4 years old, he realized that he was attracted to men, basically. Well, I'm just going to throw my opinion out there, I guess, without asking your question. The gay by birth, the gay by choice debate, it's a waste of time. Give me your thoughts on that.
I actually have some thoughts written down. I think we're all created with God's intention, right? That's what Christians believe. So before we're born, we're alive in the mind of God, and God intends us to be who we are, right? So if we're born to have an attraction towards the same sex or multiple sexes, multiple genders, that's how we're born. And that's how God intended us to be. It seems pretty simple when you put it like that, but that makes sense to me. Now, some people, for instance, Gay Christian Answers has a little bit of a different take on it. And I like their take, because I don't know as much as Gay Christian Answers does about gay Christian questions and answers. They kind of look at things from a perspective of side A and side B. And I think we have a chart. And this is just me giving information. We can talk about agreeing and disagreeing with it as much as we want, but it helps me to understand that birth idea. Side A, God allows gay relationships. And the Bible, in some sense, has been misunderstood. Side B, God doesn't allow gay relationships. And the Bible kind of has it right in that respect. So as a result, gays should be celibate. In some sense, the idea is that the Bible doesn't condemn being gay, but it condemns acts of homosexuality.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's an important thing a lot of people miss on what, even if they take that side, what it really means as far as who you're attracted to, as far as what you do with it. You know, if you have just the basic, and it's hard to just talk about these kind of things. I feel like Christian morality, as far as don't steal, don't lie, those sort of things, we could all come to a reasonable understanding and agreement on those things. When it comes to sexual things, when it comes to what Paul would say, sins of the flesh, or intoxication, drunkenness, or just what people generally say now is like, well, that's none of your business, or that's not really the point. But for lost my train of thought. The side B, to understand who you're attracted to, being tempted, as it were. Temptation is not the sin. Doubt isn't the sin, at least as far as my understanding of what I've read and what I've studied. And it's talking about a certain behavior, it's talking about a certain act, and there's a difference. So accepting someone because they are attracted to a certain individual, we have unmarried ministers who might be attracted to women, and that's not a problem. But then you have when a church says, we're going to have this gay priest come in, and they all get up in arms about it, well, that priest is choosing to be celibate, so what's the problem? And the problem at that point, I've got to say, it seems like it's homophobia, is all it is, and maybe some hatred that goes with it, because maybe fear leads to hatred, like Yoda said, or whatever. But fear and hatred, it's even more than just the phobia. It's this hatred type thing, and it's just a complete, I think, misunderstanding of what we're talking about and what the issues really are. It's not being tempted a certain way. It's not wanting to do something. It's, are you doing it or not? And I think on an individual basis, that's between, your individual's understanding and their religion, their relationship with God. We tend to just blanket, like, oh, these kind of people, and that's not getting us anywhere. And, I think side B, it's a little bit misrepresented. We have, the hateful churches in Kansas, God hates you, and it's easy. It's easy to take that and bash that down, and misunderstand that and misrepresent that. But then on the other hand, I feel like, we're not educated enough about the other side as well, as far as maybe not just Christians, maybe everyone needs a little bit of education about these issues, what we're really talking about, and the bottom line.
I mean, a couple of arguments that I hear a lot, one comes from Genesis, and the old standard comes from Leviticus. But from Genesis, we get the idea that God's order and design is so that men and women will be together so that they can make babies, so that we can reproduce, right? And I think that connects to what you were saying about celibacy. Side B, Christians would say that's great. Do you know what I mean? God made men and women so that they can reproduce, so I'm going to be celibate, and I'm not going to engage in homosexual acts.
Right.
But that kind of erases the fact that not all male and female couples have babies. Not everybody can reproduce biologically. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Some women can't reproduce, some men can't reproduce, some couples can't reproduce together. And gay men and women can reproduce, but they can only love somebody of the same gender. So they're still made in God's design. It's just that part of God's design was that they aren't able to love somebody that they can physically, biologically reproduce with. Genesis also says that, man and perhaps woman can't live alone. So every line you can find in the Bible that you could say, oh, this proves that it's wrong, it proves that it's a sin. There's another line or 10 other lines that prove that love is the more powerful emotion. So,
well, I wouldn't go to Genesis to say, this is the definition of marriage is for childbirth because of some of the reasons you bring forth. You can have your different understanding about what the example is and why it is that way, but I don't know if necessarily, like you said, because of not just celibacy, because of people who can't have children, who are, infertile, that, that's not necessarily, the purpose is not necessarily the reason behind why they would believe that.
Yeah.
You mentioned Leviticus.
Yeah.
And
the big guns.
I couldn't agree more on your conclusion. I reach at it from a different perspective. I'm reading Romans, I'm reading Galatians, I'm reading, the New Testament, and I see basically the overview is just there's the New Covenant, there's the Old Covenant, there's the law of liberty, James calls it, given to Christians, there's the law of Moses, the prophets, and the things given to Israel, and there being a big separation. So go into that and what your understanding of that is.
Yeah. Well, Leviticus, the line that everybody pulls out, and I'm not sure where it's from, but it's abomination to the Lord, right?
I'm going to say chapter 18.
1822, right? Or
like
2013. Those are the two I have written down.
Okay.
I know you know your Bible better than me, so I did my homework. And I think what's an abomination, what they call an abomination, is lying with a man as with a woman, right? So that's an abomination unto the Lord. Just right there, we get clearly the fact that being gay isn't a sin. But lying with a man as with a woman is a sin. So, side B Christians would say, okay, great, and now I'm going to go be celibate. But then, if you really look into that passage, like linguistically, the way I always love to look at the Bible, if you look at the Hebrew translation for abomination, it translates into something forbidden, not something hated, just something not allowed by God, right? And the Old Testament rules, especially in Leviticus, condemn a lot of things. Like, I don't know how many of you have shaved in the room, have cut your hair, have dyed your hair, have a tattoo, have ever worn fur, are wearing a poly cotton blend, because all of those things are abominations in the eyes of the Lord. And the reason that Moses gave these rules to the Israelites was so that they could differentiate themselves from the polytheistic culture that they were a part of. That was the purpose of these rules. So the Old Testament condemns a lot of stuff that we don't follow anymore. I know a lot of people, like my mom's a great Christian, but she's dyed her hair since she was 22 because she doesn't want to see the grays. Do you know what I mean? She doesn't follow that rule. So the Old Testament is probably not the best place to be getting advice for how to live as a modern Christian. That's kind of my perspective. We have all of the New Testament books and chapters, and what they say is the blasphemy of the Spirit is the only unforgivable sin. So we have all of these things that are suggested that we shouldn't do, but at one point God says, eat of the fruit that I had forbidden. Do you know what I mean? He says, do this. You know, I encourage you. The old covenant is broken. It's no longer binding, but we're living now in the covenant of Jesus Christ. And that, to me, says that these old laws and these old rules are designed for a certain place and designed for a certain time, but not for the modern time.
Yeah.
And in keeping with that, then the side A Christian would say, right, so I am free to love who I should love because these old covenant laws aren't binding.
Yeah, and if there's going to be any debate, if there's going to be any, interpretation, it's going to be, 2 or 3 passages from the New Testament rather than, and we don't have to go there today. That's not our point.
Because I didn't study the New Testament.
That's fine. But if there's going to be any disagreement, it's not going to be what Leviticus says. It's not going to be what it's not going to be mixed fibers. It's not going to be the animal sacrifice. It's not going to be the Sabbath. It's not going to be anything like that. It's going to be
eagles.
Or anything like that. So it's kind of boring, but we kind of agree on this in a lot of ways. I
think you said it right. It comes down to homophobia, which I think is a root of ignorance. If you just look it through and study a little bit and do a little bit of research and reading, it doesn't make sense. And so I think the more that we can answer people's questions and find out why they think the way they do or address them, the more people we can reach, the better, I guess, is my feeling.
Okay. Are you open to questions now?
Yeah.
And we've got a limited audience here in the studio, so I want to give them the opportunity first and foremost. We want to open the phone lines too, eventually. Extension 7111 on campus, 245-7111 for anyone else in the community not on campus, I think.
It's area code 740 for people like me who aren't from around here.
Well, that's true too. But so just going to take a few moments. If anyone here has a question, just let us know. If not, we're going to open the phone lines and continue on some other topics. Didn't mean to put anybody on the spot there.
They can be questions about things that we said or things that you're wondering, things that you've been taught, anything like that. And I don't believe you have to be on camera to ask a question.
Yeah, so you can even just shout one out. And anyone watching, we've got the phone lines available too. So.
You want to say the number again?
Yeah, I'll say it again. 7111 is the extension on campus. If you're outside, the area code 740-245-7111. So we'll give that a few moments. I was really hoping for questions, but we have some other things we can talk about. Did you have any questions you wanted to ask me? I think I've been facilitating a lot of the discussion.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty good.
Well, that's great. Trying to get them to ask us questions. And
I know, and I'm not even asking questions. I apologize. I didn't come with a lot of questions.
Well, that's okay. I talked a little bit about that. You emphasized at one point in the discussion last semester that homosexuals can be in monogamous relationships.
Yeah.
You wanted to emphasize that, or is there anything else to say about that?
Yeah, that's fine. Absolutely. I think a lot of people think that homosexuality isn't monogamous, and there are people who choose to be in polyamorous relationships with more than one person, committed relationships. But most of the people that I know who are lesbian and gay identified are monogamous. They choose to be with one partner for an extended period of time, the ion being a long time. You know what I mean? As people get older, they partner together. Some people get married in New York and in hopes that the repeal of DOMA will allow those laws to transfer. I had a friend, 2 friends of mine actually from Cincinnati just went out to Niagara Falls 2 weekends ago to have a commitment ceremony, and in the interest of getting better federal benefits, and also in the interest of the fact that they've been together for 11 years, so it's about time. Monogamy is, I think, completely different than sexual orientation.
Right.
Your feeling of, can you be satisfied by one partner? Do you want more than one partner? How are you going to negotiate that? But at the end of the day, bisexual people can be monogamous. You know, just because you have attraction to more than one gender doesn't mean that you're going to constantly be scheming and cheating and trying to find somebody of another gender. I identify as bisexual, and I'm married to a man. And I have been married to a man for 2 years, and we've been monogamous, and we continue to be and plan to be. Our relationship is based on monogamy. We're going to be together, just me and him. That doesn't mean that I have lost the ability to be attracted to women. It just means that I'm not going to act on it because I've made a commitment to my partner. And I think that that could be the truth for anybody. Do you know? My friend Jessica is married to her husband Larry, I think for over a decade. I'm not sure how long, and I was in their wedding, so I know they're going to be upset that I don't remember how long. But, you know, she can find men attractive, and that doesn't mean that she's going to go step out on her husband, you know. And I can find other men attractive, too, and it doesn't mean that I'm going to go step out on my husband. So the idea of monogamy is more of a commitment that you're making to your partner. And you can do that regardless of gender, I think. And just because somebody might be pan or bisexual doesn't mean that they're unable to commit to a partner.
So I guess that's mainly geared toward the side B Christians. The side A wouldn't have a problem with it. The side B just needs to realize that it would be possible for this is your basic view, that no matter what your orientation is, that you can be involved in a monogamous relationship regardless of...
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't I mean, the side A and side B, that comes from Gay Christian Answers, which you can find on YouTube, and they have a lot of great videos. That's a concept I got from them. It's not an original one to me.
Right.
And I haven't met a lot of side B Christians. I've met side A Christians. It's Christians that believe that the Bible condemns not homosexuality, but child abuse and rape and idolatry, and that it's not speaking to them because the Old Testament and the Old Covenant is no longer binding as a modern Christian. So, but I like the idea of side B because I do think that it honors the fact that some people do believe in literal translations of the Bible.
Oh, I want to interject here. I think it was Michael during the panel discussion. He's like, you know, you can believe whatever you want to believe. And at first I'm kind of like, you know, well, I don't know. But I think the bottom line is you can believe whatever you want to believe, but there's a certain way you need to deal with that. There's, you know, that doesn't justify the kind of violence, that doesn't justify anything, no matter which side you're on or whatever issue that you feel is important. And I think, I'm not sure what I'm trying to get at here, but go ahead.
My cousin, and she's an older cousin, she's I'm guessing in her 60s. I posted something on my Facebook, you know, all the best stuff comes from Facebook feeds, about the kids in Pittsburgh who were assaulted. And she was the first person to comment a reply, and she said, even if you don't agree with the lifestyle, which I don't like that language, the lifestyle, because whatever, because I think it's how you're born. But what she wrote, even if you don't agree with the lifestyle, there's no reason to commit acts of violence and to commit hate. And what she said was, we need to accept and love one another. And that to me was really powerful because she is a devout Catholic, raised Catholic, gone to Catholic school, and she was a child, sent her children to Catholic school, and she still goes to church every Wednesday and Sunday. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So she's very devout, but even she is able to mature and understand enough to know that there are other ways of being in the world, and even if it doesn't make sense to her, that doesn't mean that it's not valid. And I think that's part of the thing. It doesn't make sense to me to be transgender, to be transsexual. I'm a woman. I feel like a woman. I feel comfortable in my body. And part of me doesn't understand how somebody couldn't. But that doesn't mean that that's not a valid identity, do you know? And so that's what I come back to. I think about how I'm an ally with other communities and how even though it doesn't make sense because it's not the choice that I'd make or isn't how I feel, that doesn't mean that it's invalid. And yeah.
Absolutely. I don't know if I brought this up before, but we have some time. We're not getting a lot of questions. What's your thoughts on, as far as church and state, as far as church and government, as far as legal issues? And this kind of does come up into discussion a little bit. It's not what I want to focus on, but I want to kind of get your stance on your idea about, or just if you have any ideas on it at all.
You talking about marriage?
Maybe. I mean, that's typically where the conflict is right now.
I think that there is a separation of church and state dictated by. I'm not sure if it's the Constitution or the Declaration. I'm looking at somebody who might know who's not telling me. But it's dictated by our government. And separation of church and state, that's, one of the things that we're guaranteed, and that's one of the things that this nation was founded on. People leaving persecution for their religion and coming here for religious freedom. And I believe that is foundational to our country. We have many religions functioning at once in our country. So I think, that said, marriage is federally a legal issue, right? When you get married in terms of the government, that's a federal situation. I got married. I went to City Hall. I took a number. I sat in line, and then a judge called me up and was like, hey, Dan, hey, April, we now pronounce you blah, 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 and you can kiss. And we did all that fun stuff and then went and took pictures outside. And then I had a ceremony afterwards that was more spiritual and more for family. So I think a lot of people do that. They go and get their marriage license with the state, with the government, and then have a ceremony outside. Now, sometimes the clergy will sign that document and act as the person who's actually marrying them. But the certificate is a legal document. So marriage, as defined by our country, is a legal situation, right? It is also defined by Christian faith as a religious situation, but you can be married and not be Christian. So I think that there is definitely a separation there. The decision of whether or not people should be able to marry in various Christian churches, I think, is out of my hands. But the idea that marriage should be legal and equal is a matter of federal government law.
Yeah, one of my atheist friends really turned me on to this. Why don't we have and I'm not saying this is the way we should go, but he's like, why don't we have a legal definition and let the churches do their thing, and neither the twain shall meet, is basically his.
Well, I think sometimes the twain shall meet, but if they don't, it wouldn't be an issue. I think
True.
that's how I think about it. My friends of mine who are religious, they still have to go to the courthouse to get their marriage license. That's where the marriage license comes from. And whoever's ordained to sign it can sign it. Whoever's ordained by, whoever the government decides can sign it, can sign it. And some of those people are clergy, and some of them are justice of the peace, and some of them are ordained online for $30 like my sister was. You know what I mean? And it was just, so that she could sign the paper in some sense. Which was useless, we found out later, because we got it signed at City Hall. So.
Well, I'm going to blow some people away here. Separation of church and state. I see some implications in the 13th chapter of the book of Romans regarding the separation of church and state. And I think Christians, or maybe it's ministers, I don't know where the problem's coming from, we get kind of arrogant. We think, this is how a Christian democracy should be run, because you don't get that. And, early church history, you have Christianity operating under Roman, dictatorship, an emperor. You have it spreading to, and the idea, at least my understanding is, a universal religion. It doesn't matter if you have a dictatorship. It doesn't matter if you have an oligarchy. It doesn't matter if you have a democracy. And I understand the difficulty for someone being a side B Christian saying, well, I can't support, this kind of law because that would be against my beliefs. And I understand, but I think a lot of the ways that, and I can't stand politics. I can't stand getting involved in politics. I'd rather just, try to deal with what's right and what's wrong, and as a preacher, deal with the scriptures and let everyone else make their own decisions about that. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people want to be led and don't want to make their own decisions. But aside from that, I'm saying, there's no guidebook as far as, this is what you can support, this is what you can't, this is, set in stone as far as the legal matters, as far as living in a democracy, because we don't really have that outlined. And I think separating church and state, I think a lot of the arguments people use against Christianity, it's like, well, you've got the Crusades, you've got this, you've got that, you've got the church becoming the state, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and there's been problems with that. But I think there's the very early, 2,000 years ago or so, the idea that the government is somehow, and to varying degree, ordained by God or whatever, because these emperors came into power by, God in control, basically. The idea that, the church isn't the one that bears the sword. The government carries out capital punishment. The government carries out this. The government does that. The church isn't meant to go to war. It's not meant to execute people, and that's the difference between, the Levitical thing and the New Testament. And I think a lot of people just miss the boat on that when they get carried away with a certain political issue or a certain party. And, I might lean one way or another, but I'm not tied down to a certain political party personally. And that might just be my opinion. I guess I should start out, I can't really speak for anyone other than myself and my own personal understanding of these issues and what I've studied myself. But I see a lot of battles that we're fighting that we don't need to. We're fighting, is someone born gay or is it a choice? Well, that's not important. Should we all get together and eat chicken sandwiches and exclude these people? I mean, what's that going to accomplish? And I think it's time and for me, I think the people that I take problems with the most are those who are, not informed about the situation, and they're going off on these tangents. And I think bad arguments and faulty things and not understanding the issues is hurting the entire idea of religion. Has put bad taste in people's mouths. And it's kind of the people, for me, that I think should know better, but don't necessarily.
Yeah.
So that's probably the most I'm going to say for the rest of the discussion, but that's I think something that we need to have a better understanding about is, our duty as a Christian isn't to this party or that party or this cause in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of these things are individual, like I remember my mom telling me a long time ago that you should never ask somebody who they voted for because it's one of the most private things, and that idea that politics can be personal, I think is really true. I don't, my opinion on I'm a political person just because I'm alive in the world, but
right.
I don't think that your religious belief should dictate a political party or a political affiliation in any way. That doesn't even make sense to me, because I think religious belief should dictate your love of faith, your love of your community, your love of your scripture, as opposed to your love of bills and laws and Congress. It just, people praying at Congress, I don't know, seeing somebody go to a church, that makes more sense than, going, it just doesn't seem to be the same experience. But I guess that's talking about design, and it's not designed for that, which gets us in a whole nother ball of wax, but.
Yeah,
I think one of the things that I hear a lot of people say is that, men and women weren't designed to be together. Do you know what I mean? Like, slot A, tab B sort of thing, get very crude. And it makes me think of people, like deaf people, right? They don't use their ears. Like, ears were designed for communication. They were designed to hear, right? But if you're deaf, you're not using your ears for communication. So you use your hands, even though that's not how they were designed. Right?
Okay.
That's not a sin. Like, using things for a different way than they were designed isn't necessarily a sin. Just because people weren't designed theoretically to be together doesn't mean that their love for one another is sinful, right? Using something for a way that it's not designed is not necessarily a sin. And what I'm talking about using is your heart, everybody.
I was going to make a comment about prayer or something, but I kind of lost it. So, looks like we have about 15 minutes or so left. If we have any questions at all, we need to get to those before we run out of time. Remember, the extension on campus is 7111. The number for the community is 740-245-7111. This is what I do sometimes. I give out a number, and sometimes you get a call, and sometimes you don't. Yeah. But it's all good.
Right on.
First of all, I
Get a mic there.
Thank you both for this gift of a civil conversation. Some folks may be shocked that it's possible to happen related to the topic, but let me say one thing in context and then pose a question. To this point, it seems like there's three intersecting points of love, sex, and law that the two of you have made great peace about. And I don't think folks pretend that marriage is always blessed with love, and we know that's just not the case, and that people come together for all sorts of reasons. But societally, law has provided a contract ceremony that ensures that we're going to track you down for some of your responsibilities. If you have children, somebody's going to pay for your burial, if somebody else is hiding assets, child support and all those kinds of things. So it does serve a function to keep track of agreements people may have made. The love part is a little harder to ensure or guarantee because it could be filled with deception or self-deception or deception of other people who are lying to you about things and the such. And I'm glad that we've moved as far as we have relative to gay rights based upon civil rights. The issue that I think doesn't get talked about a lot, not the least of which is I think religion, beyond just a relationship with God, has also provided good civil code for being nice to each other. And so different scriptures or different biblical source might defend that one way or the other. But what we have difficulty talking about would be, and these accusations preceded the gay civil rights movement, was promiscuity. And so there's parts of love and sex and law that I think intrude upon an answer to that question, which is like, well, what should we use as a guidance for how free should you be with the biological part? Because there are folks who just say it's nobody's business, and whenever you're in the mood, you should do it frequently, often, and probably again, is what somebody might say. Being responsible for that consequence saves some arguments when it comes to procreation, but there's other issues related to that, not the least of which is property and deceit among friends, and the myth of monogamy that might have been very true for somebody else, but it's like you lied to me and all that kind of stuff. As a marriage counselor, that's what I end up seeing a lot of, is people who are alleging deceit, and it doesn't matter what you said, you promised me this. So what's the current state of the moral code, whether it's going to be religious or whether it's going to be social law? What's your view on the current state of promiscuity as a code to be addressed?
Well, I can speak from my own opinions and from my own research. In terms of promiscuity, I think the most important thing is that somebody is honest, right? So I think that polyamorous relationships between more than one person, or relationships between two people as a primary unit, where those two people allow for encounters outside of the relationship, I think that that's absolutely okay, as long as the two people in the relationship, or the three people, or the six people in the relationship have hammered out their ethics and moral responsibilities to one another ahead of time, how they're going to behave and all those sorts of things. That said, I think that ultimately it's going to be up to each individual. Promiscuity, I find some difficulty with, because I think that as long as you're being honest with yourself and honest with other people, then you should kind of be able to, I don't know how you said it, have as much as you want, and then again after that. So that's kind of, the more the merrier. It's relaxing, it eases stress and all these other sorts of things, and actually makes for a better partnership between people. So I think that that's really good. And in terms of guidance, I think that for me, it's been more important for me to look inside myself and see what feels right, kind of in my gut, than it has to find a set of rules that exist outside. I've never found a lot of luck looking at other people's rules, but there are some rules that I'm fine with, you know, trust, honesty, respect, and those things are, I think, tenets of Christianity, and they're in the commandments and things like that. But in terms of where's the tome of moral guidance, I feel like maybe thankfully so, there isn't one tome of moral guidance, but more, these are all of the things that we can look at, and as individuals, we need to make our own moral code. We need to figure out what works for us in these different situations and be able to respond to that, be able to defend it, and be able to understand it on our own terms, right? For me, looking to the Bible hasn't been as powerful as looking to the Bible and comparing it to my life, or looking to the Bible and comparing it to the world. It's that real sense of I'm my own person and I can make my own code for being nice. I know what it means, you know? And I also know that just being nice sometimes doesn't mean smiling and nodding. Sometimes being nice means saying, you know, what you said right there was really hateful, and I don't know if you know that. Do you know what I mean? So I guess that's my response in terms of what guidance do I feel should be where we should look for guidance as a culture.
Mm-hmm. And basically, I'm just going to echo what I said earlier. You know, I feel a lot more comfortable talking about, you know, these arguments, you know, is there a God, and talk about that, and give reasons why, you know, I believe that the Bible specifically, God's revelation to man, and the evidences and things we could go with that. I feel more comfortable with that than saying, oh, it's wrong for you to go out and have sex and be promiscuous. I understand that's difficult, but on just a plain philosophical, moral, legal standpoint, and it seems like we've kind of given up on outlawing promiscuity. We've given up on outlawing, you know, divorce and this, that, and the other, and what you want to figure out what the Bible says about that. And then, like I said, it's a bit inconsistent to say, well, we have to advocate for this and define marriage and this from a Christian political standpoint. I believe that we can reason a great number of things, what's right and what's wrong, from our own experience. The same way I think we can reason, you know, to God from our own experience, from our own observations. The heavens declare the glory of God, and we can reason out a certain number of things. Reason would be a gift from God if you believe in God. The question of, you know, these difficult questions, the sexual ethics, the personal, even, you know, the Bible says the same thing about drunkenness, and we don't hear a lot of crusades about that the way we used to. And, you know, it's in the same passage that a lot of people allude to in Corinthians. But I think the bottom line, and I keep saying the bottom line, I keep giving you a different answer, but
lots of bottom lines.
For me, somebody comes to me and they want to know what's right, what's wrong. I can tell them, you know, well, we can see that this is right, this is wrong. We can see that these people attacking these people is wrong, and we can see that, you know, there's ways to have your faith and try to influence. John Knox said you can't influence someone while you're antagonizing them, is the paraphrase I'm going to give. And I think that's the reason for this discussion. And, you know, one person comes to me and they want to know what I think is right, is wrong, why I believe it, what I believe and what I believe it. Sorry. What I believe and why I believe it.
Yeah.
And I can supply a lot of things. And in the end, all I can say as far as, you know, like I keep emphasizing, it doesn't matter if you're, you know, it doesn't matter as far as the issues, you know, are you choosing to be attracted to members of the same sex? Were you always felt that way? I'm going to allude to Matthew 19. Jesus said, some are born eunuchs, some are made eunuchs by men, some are eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. Some are born celibate, some are made celibate by men, and some might need to be celibate for the kingdom of heaven's sake. And I think that's a personal choice. I think that's something that, you know, I would be willing to sit down and discuss with anyone. We can talk about the philosophy of God. We can talk about comparative religions, which a lot of people aren't comfortable with, for that kind of, just that fear, like this threat to their faith. And my challenge is, you know, learn about your faith and understand it, because if there's anything that can threaten it, then you know, what is there? What
Other
substance
ideas
is there
aren't
to
a threat.
it?
They're like teaching and learning moments, you know?
Absolutely.
For me, the things that I think are wrong morally, genocide, across the board, never going to
Objectively.
support a genocide, and hatefulness in terms of homophobia and racism and things like that. Those are things that I think across the board are wrong. And I get a little, iffy when it comes to stealing, because if you don't have money and you need food, things like that, and even murder, I can get a little iffy. But large-scale genocide, small-scale genocide, any kind of genocide, I'm really not a fan of, unless you're trying to kill the weeds in my yard. Then come on. But and anything that's comes from a place of hate, like hate or ignorance, racism, sexism, homophobia, lots of isms, classism, things like that. So those are, for me, the moral things. And when I might have used the Ten Commandments as a guide and then stepped it back. I think my moral guide is probably George Carlin, more than anybody else, in the way that he kind of talks about things. Narrowing it down.
I see.
Look at George Carlin talk about the Ten Commandments. It's on YouTube.
Okay, time is short, and I just wanted to let you guys, you want to give your group and where you're meeting, when you're meeting, and maybe why you meet, and why the group is formed. So, Gavin, you are with LIGHT.
LIGHT, again, is another acronym, stands for Living in God's Holy Truth. I'm broadcasting tomorrow at 2:30 from the studio. We gave up the numbers. You can contact me personally. I've got flyers up and everything. I'm looking forward to, and I might want to focus on more of an individualized Bible study discussion for students. If there's any need or any want or any desire to, any questions you might have had that you didn't ask today, I'm always going to be available for that. Anything you felt like we didn't cover or whatever, I'm always open to any type of discussion or anything, any way I can help out. So we're looking forward to maybe a group discussion, group Bible study at some point, if there's enough student interest. And I'm putting myself out there on the airwaves. I don't know what people are thinking, what they're feeling, what they're saying about it, the show or the study or what we're putting out there. But I'd welcome any feedback and anyone who has any interest, and get to know me a little bit better, and we'll build on that. We've just been on campus since last semester. I know LIGHT has existed in the past in different forms and different leaders and ministers and things like that, but that's all I have to say about that.
Wait a second.
Pausing for technical difficulties.
Switch to the top of the hour.
Okay.
Should I go? And the LGBTA is actually meeting today at 2:30, so in about a half an hour in the red zone. Next week we're going to be having our Ally Week pledge drive, so you'll be seeing us at the Cyber Cafe and around campus. We'll have little stickers on asking people if they want to join the LGBTA or just pledge to be a ally to the LGBT community. We're having a movie night on Tuesday where we're showing But I'm a Cheerleader at 7 o'clock in the red zone, Tuesday the 15th, and then Thursday the 17th we'll be having a workshop that anybody can attend, and it is pending LA 101 approval, Ally 101, so how you can be a better ally to the LGBT community and to your friends and classmates. We normally meet on Tuesdays or Thursdays at 2:30 in the red zone, and you can always find out that information by following us on Twitter at RioLGBTA, or checking out our website rio.edu/LGBTA. And I'm April Julier. You can find me in Allen Hall.
All right.
Okay. Close it.
Anything else you want to add?
Thanks for inviting me to this discussion. I was happy to share with you, and I hope that people who are watching and not asking questions found out that there's not so much difference between the two groups and our missions and identities.
Yeah. The only difference I think that there should be, as far as the main conflict between your cause and Side B Christians, is one's personal responsibility to God as far as their behavior, their sexual whatever, and possibly a definition of marriage. And obviously some will never come to agreement on that, but we can get understanding and education about these issues and I think grow a lot.
Yeah, I think the important thing is that we come together for conversation instead of conflict, and I think that's the most important thing. So showing that this conversation does happen and can happen.
Absolutely.
Right on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.